Most cricket fans believe the Hansie Cronje scandal was about one man, one captain, one shocking confession. But corruption in cricket never works alone. It needs silence, it needs cooperation, and it needs people who are close enough to the fire to feel its heat, without getting burned. One of those names is Pieter Strydom, a South African cricketer whose name surfaced during the 2000 match-fixing inquiry, not as the headline villain, but as someone implicated by recordings and inquiry evidence. And that alone raises a question cricket has never fully answered. Pieter Strydom was not a global star. He was not leading teams or commanding international attention. He existed in the shadows of professional cricket, where domestic players fight for contracts, stability, and relevance. That world is where vulnerability lives, and it's also where bookmakers often look first, not for fame, but for access, information, quiet cooperation. When the Cronje scandal erupted, South African cricket entered crisis mode. The King Commission of Inquiry began exposing taped phone calls, testimonies, and details that made one thing very clear. Hansie Cronje did not operate in isolation. His conversations suggested a wider circle of awareness and involvement, and within that circle, the name Pieter Strydom appeared. Recordings presented to the inquiry linked Strydom to discussions around bookmakers and inside knowledge. His name was not mentioned casually. It appeared in a context serious enough to place him under suspicion. And yet, unlike Cronje, Strydom never became a public symbol of corruption. His implication stayed quiet, almost protected. That silence is important, because corruption in cricket doesn't always mean fixing a match yourself. Sometimes it means knowing what's happening and choosing not to speak. Sometimes it means passing information. Sometimes it means allowing influence to flow without resistance. And inquiry evidence suggested that Strydom's role existed somewhere in that gray area, not clean enough to ignore, but not explosive enough to pursue aggressively. The inquiry wasn't designed to destroy everyone involved. It was designed to expose the core wrongdoing and restore confidence in the game. And in doing so, it created winners and losers. Cronje paid the ultimate price. Others faded into the background. Pieter Strydom was one of them. What makes this unsettling is that domestic players like Strydom were extremely valuable to bookmakers. They were close to teams, close to dressing rooms, close to conversations that never reached the media. Pitch conditions, player moods, team selections, these details had value. And once a player becomes a source, even informally, the line between awareness and involvement disappears. Yet despite being named in inquiry records, Strydom faced no lasting public reckoning, no dramatic punishment, no career-defining ban remembered by fans, just an association with a scandal that cricket seemed eager to move past. And that raises a bigger question. How many names were sacrificed to protect the system, while others were quietly spared to help cricket move on? South African cricket needed healing. Sponsors were watching, fans were angry, the sport's reputation was on the line. Digging too deeply into secondary figures may have created more damage than the authorities were willing to risk, so the narrative narrowed, the focus sharpened, and figures like Pieter Strydom became footnotes instead of chapters. But footnotes still tell a story. They tell us that corruption wasn't an accident, it was a culture where silence was safer than honesty, where players weighed integrity against survival, and where not everyone was judged by the same standard. To this day, Strydom's name remains unfamiliar to most fans. That's not because the inquiry cleared him completely, it's because the game chose not to keep asking questions. And in corruption cases, unanswered questions are often the most revealing part. The Hansie Cronje scandal is remembered as a moment when cricket confronted its demons, but the truth is, it only confronted the ones it could afford to lose. Others walked away quietly, carrying knowledge that never fully came to light. Pieter Strydom represents that uncomfortable truth, not the worst offender, not the hero, but a reminder that corruption survives in the gray spaces, where involvement is implied, evidence exists, and accountability stops short. And until cricket is willing to examine those gray spaces honestly, the sport will always be vulnerable to repeating the same mistakes, because the real damage isn't done by the man who confesses, it's done by everyone who knew and stayed silent.